go from this to this. Let's improve those lackluster enclosures. Hello and welcome back to Triple Gaming with me, Fletcher, and today we are going to be going over some very simple ways of improving your enclosure design in Jurassic World Evolution 2. However, before we get started, don't forget to like, comment, and if you're new here, subscribe, and if you have any ideas or anything you want to see me design for you, let me know in the comments section. Now, on to the video. Welcome to Great Britain, or at least what Frontier thinks Great Britain looks like. I'll be honest, I don't really think any part of the UK looks like this. I've chosen this location to demonstrate some simple methods in which you can improve your enclosures. Often, not just in my videos, but I've seen it while moderating for Evolution Square, there's often calls from the chat about how amazing the enclosure designs are and that those watching can't come up with anything that good. Well, I say that's total bullshit, and I'm going to show you some really simple methods to improve your own designs. So where to start? Let's take this, a really simple enclosure that you might build for a smaller species of dinosaur. It's not bad, but it could definitely be improved. So let's remake this enclosure from the ground up, and let's start with the basics. Starting with water is often a good way to begin designing an enclosure. A simple pool is okay, but it's a bit dull and boring. So instead of a pool, let's create a small stream. This can take a little work as you need to create the rough route of the stream using the smallest brush available, and then use the remove tool to carefully narrow the watercourse. Now another thing people don't do enough of is highlighting where their water actually is. Use the texture brushes to add a bit of different texture to the water, and add some stones along the banks. Add some of the bigger rocks that we have in the decorations panel at either end of the stream to hide the fact that it's a bit of a fake river. Now for vegetation. The key to good vegetation is to not overdo it with trees and to layer the vegetation brushes to create a good mix of colours and types. It also helps to think about where vegetation would realistically grow. Low bushes and shrubs along the stream helps again to highlight the water. Add a few more patches around the enclosure and then move on to the trees. We don't want to overdo it here with trees and fill up the entire enclosure, because realistically, guests need to be able to see our dinosaurs, we want to be able to see our dinosaurs, and trees do actually need space to grow. Turn down the intensity on the brush and just wait for the right amount of trees, in your opinion, to form. Again, remember to mix a few of the other vegetation brushes in where you have the trees. Don't be afraid to remove vegetation if you think there's too much. Now with the empty space around these vegetation patches, just paint in some low intensity dirt, sand or even rock to help make it look like dinosaurs have created paths around the enclosure and worn away walking routes. Now with the enclosure itself looking better, let's look at the outside. This is just a simple gallery, but it can be improved. Some planters to outline the path, some rocks between the path and the fence, and some of the trees help to improve the entrance. And there we have it. A very simple enclosure improved with some very basic methods. But what about something a little more interesting? Let's create one of my favourite types of enclosure. Start by building a hexagon out of pathing and add the fencing inside. If you don't know how to create geometric shapes using paving, then let me know in the comments and I'll have to show you sometime. Now a good way to add interest to your enclosures is to use height differences. You can use this to link different sections of your park together. Let's start by creating a raised section towards the back of this enclosure, and we'll keep the front on the ground level. On this lower ground level, we'll use it for the water, and again we'll make it stand out using a mixture of different texture brushes and rocks to create the illusion of a riverbed. Smooth the incline between the back and the front of the enclosure to create a gentle, dinosaur-friendly slope. And to make the incline stand out, we're going to put some low intensity dirt and rock just along the ridge here, just to make it look like it's been well worn. To further differentiate the two heights, I'm going to put larger trees at the back of the enclosure and keep the smaller shrubs to the front. Now when it comes to viewing inside an enclosure like this, don't forget that a tower or a gallery doesn't have to be necessarily attached to the fencing. Here, I've placed the gallery on the front edge here, and created a simple pathway avenue leading up to it. You can decorate this however you like. Again, a simple enclosure, but the use of height adds a little bit more interest than just keeping it all on one level. And of course, you can always do this the other way round and have the enclosure sweeping down away from any viewing gallery area you might have, like I did in my first Battle of the Buildings video, which will be linked up in the top corner. Now another type of enclosure I like is what I call the well enclosure. That is a paddock that is below the path level. I'm going to start this enclosure by making it rather larger than the others, outline the area with fencing, and I'm going to add 2 viewing galleries in opposing corners. To create the well, use the depression tool, but remember we don't want this too deep. 4 to 5 contour lines is often enough, and I find it's useful to count contour lines when you're doing lots of landscape work. Use the water tool to find the best level, and then flatten the rest of this enclosure, keeping a hard edge around the perimeter. Now we're going to turn this enclosure into a beachy sandy one with a simple pond in the centre. To make the sidewall stand out, I've used the rock brush to paint the edges and to highlight the edge of the water. Since this is a beach style enclosure, I'm going to be careful with the plant life I use here. Seed plants make for good tropical looking trees, as do cycads and the leafy climber brush. Layer the vegetation again for a nice mixture of types and colour. Add some rocks around the enclosure to create artificial landscaping, for example around the water source, around the bottom of the viewing galleries, or just in different areas of the paddock. Again, this simple enclosure stands out amongst the parks that may look rather flat. Now, in classic Blue Peter fashion, here's a few that I made earlier. In my Arizona Reserve Park, we have this well enclosure for the herbivores. You can see here that the enclosure is overlooked all around, both at the plaza end, but then at the far end, which is even higher with this central viewing gallery. A mound for the herbivore food sources is highlighted by both rocks and the monorail artwork structure in the centre of the paddock, and again a mix of vegetation heights and layers helps it to look more realistic. Something that is also important to remember, especially with herbivore enclosures, is to not overfill them with animals. Too many animals inside a paddock makes it look crowded and wouldn't realistically be appropriate for the animals anyway. Think about how large the enclosure is and put an acceptable number of animals inside it. Moving to the next door carnivore enclosure. This one is heavily designed using mods. We have the use of the aviary Jurassic Park gallery here, which I think looks like a bunker and far more substantial for a carnivore sort of gallery. The double fencing also helps to make the enclosure look more threatening and strong. For decoration, the Jurassic Park gate is a nice touch, and behind it I've hidden the goat feeder so that it doesn't look so strange to have a goat popping out of the ground in full view of the guests. Finally here in my Dinosaurs Park, which you can see me building in the last few live streams, we have this huge but very simple enclosure for my herbivores. Not too overfilled so it doesn't look overcrowded. The enclosure itself is neatly divided into the forested rear area, this large open water area, and then this area of shrubs and grassland towards the front where the viewing galleries are. The viewing galleries themselves are positioned either side of amenity structures which all have been built with upstairs seating so that it looks like the guests have a nice view with their drinks and their food. Now of course, all these ideas are only for looks. Yes, you can build perfectly functioning dead flat parks with the most boring bland enclosures that you can, but why would you? This is the first video out of a few I'm going to do about designing better looking sandbox parks, both for those without mods and for those using mods. Let me know in the comments what sort of things you find difficult to do, and when it comes to designing nice parks, give me any challenges that you might have as well in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you've not already done so, and until the next video, stay safe and goodbye.